In part 1 of our Thrawn campaign series, we covered the political unification of the Empire, at least to a certain degree, and some of the fractures which were growing on the side of the New Republic. We also talked about the all-important Sparty cloning cylinders, which would allow the resource-strapped Empire to deploy a new clone army. But while this would address the personnel issues of the Empire, they had an even greater need for ships, the acquisition of which would become the focal point of Imperial strategy. The New Republic, meanwhile, was still unaware of what they were facing. The failed attempt to kidnap Leia at Bimisari by the Nogri sparked debate in the New Republic's inner council. Bothan Councillor Borsk Valia considered the attack to be of little concern, given the lack of information on the Nogri, which he took to mean they weren't a threat. The Solos, Luke Skywalker, and Admiral Akbar were all correctly afraid that something bigger was actually at play. The next phase of Thrawn's offensive took the Imperials further into the Outer Rim, on the opposite side of the galaxy from most Imperial territory. This region was home to Sluis, one of the New Republic's major shipyards. Because the Empire was unable to significantly increase their own ship production, Thrawn intended to simply steal what he could from the New Republic. The first step in this plan would be to lure as many New Republic ships away from Sluis as he possibly could. 10 days after the destruction of the task force near Obra Sky, Thrawn and Pellaeon took a force of 5 Star Destroyers to the outskirts of the Bipfash system near Sluis. They staged their fleet just 1/3000th of a light year away from their target zone before preparing to jump in. This technique required significant coordination given the risk of ships becoming lost in hyperspace on such precise and short-range jumps. Pellaeon had been opposed when Thrawn had originally started drilling Imperial forces for this a year prior, but by the attack on Bipfash, they were able to execute it very cleanly. This attack was also a test of the ability for Joruus C'baoth to coordinate Imperial forces from afar using battle meditation. From his position on Chimera's bridge, he was able to use the Force to direct 2 further task forces to engage in a simultaneous strike in other systems, although we don't know which beyond the fact that they were in the Sluis sector, like Bipfash and Sluis itself. Therefore, I have chosen to use Praeselin and Denab for this animation, since they were in fact planets in that sector, and they're more fun to look at than nothing. As the attack on Bipfash commenced, the system's meager defenses attempted to respond. There was a Starfighter base on the planet's third moon, as well as multiple small line ships, including 2 old Carrack cruisers. Though he was focusing on 3 battles at once, C'baoth was able to greatly improve the efficiency of the Imperial forces. Thrawn only intended to hurt rather than obliterate the defensive forces in each system, but by the time the Imperial forces pulled away, they had lost only 3 fighters, while destroying 18 enemy fighters and 8 line ships, albeit each was far less powerful than the Imperial Star Destroyers also present in the battle. A beacon calling for reinforcements and the arrival of 2 mid-sized cruisers from the planet prompted Thrawn to end all 3 attacks, returning to their rendezvous point while fielding questions from an impatient C'baoth on where his promised Jedi trainees Luke and Leia were. In order to prevent panic, the New Republic dispatched reinforcements to Bipfash and to other affected planets, thus taking away defenses from Sluis, as Thrawn had hoped. This also included sending Han and Leia to Bipfash to further reassure the locals of the New Republic's commitment to their protection. Luke had hoped to join them as well, but because of some rampaging Dark Jedi during the Clone Wars, they were less happy about the potential Jedi presence in their system. Instead, Luke went to Dagobah, hoping he could learn more from Master Yoda's former home. Leia and Han met Wedge Antilles and Rogue Squadron on Bipfash, where speculation about the attack's purpose and how they were able to coordinate the multiple strikes was rampant. Wedge mentioned rumors of a Dark Jedi named Joruus C'baoth surfacing again. The source of these rumors were actually Joruus and the Imperials themselves, since Joruus believed that if Luke knew he was out there, Luke would seek him out himself. But in the middle of this conversation, another strike team of Nogri rudely attacked, trying yet again to kidnap Leia so she and her unborn twins could be taken in for training. This time, while the trio were running from the Nogri, a fake Millennium Falcon attempted to pick them up, with Leia first noticing something was off because she couldn't sense Chewbacca's presence on the ship. Han cut the ship's coolant lines, forcing the Nogri to retreat. This raised yet another question. How had the Empire known Han and Leia would be present on Bipfash? Once in contact with Admiral Akbar, he assured them that the New Republic was doing all they could to figure out where the leak had come from, and advised the Solos to return to Coruscant. Han doubted the ability of the New Republic to keep them safe, given that if the Imperials were getting information out of Coruscant, they could probably get agents in as well. Akbar hotly denied the insinuation that the New Republic's forces were not up to the task, the heat of which Leia remarked to Han was the result of increasing political pressure from Phalia's forces to oust the legendary admiral and install Phalia himself as supreme commander. Rather than return to the capital, Han decided they needed to do the unexpected to avoid capture and take matters into their own hands. They departed to find Lando Calrissian, hoping he would have Slicer contacts allowing them to break New Republic encryptions and get to the source of the leak. Lando had become the owner and administrator of a mining operation on Nikilin, a planet so close to its hot sun that being in direct sunlight on the surface or even on approach could prove disastrous, frying all ship circuitry. On the planet, Lando ran the mining operations from Nomad City, a dreadnought heavy cruiser on the back of 50 AT-AT walkers, which were constantly moving, walking on the surface, to stay on the night side. In space, any approach to the planet had to be made in the cover of gigantic umbrella-like shield ships, which I'm not showing because I don't have a model for them. Despite the difficulty of visiting Lando here, Han and Leia weren't the only ones on their way. Luke had discovered an old ship beacon back on Dagobah, basically a device which would allow someone to call a ship to them, and he needed Lando to help identify it. Even Thrawn had plans relating to this planet. Lando's operations used a type of mining craft called a mole miner, which Thrawn hoped to capture and use in an upcoming raid on the now less defended New Republic shipyards at Sluis. The Millennium Falcon and Luke's X-Wing all arrived simultaneously with Thrawn's assault being carried out by Captain Brendai in the Judicator. The Star Destroyer far exceeded the power of Lando's meager starfighter defenses, which were kept near the planet to protect Nomad City itself. But most of Judicator's own sensors and weapons were likely stripped immediately by the intensity of the sun's heat, before the ship could reach into Nikilin's planetary shadow. The ship carried a reduced complement of TIE fighters, leaving only a single squadron, to allow room for a larger complement of troop carriers. These were protected in the ship's hangar until they managed to reach the shadow. Luke attempted to engage the TIE fighters protecting these troop transports as they came in, but the raid was over almost as quickly as it began. 51 mole miners were captured and the Judicator retreated back to Thrawn's fleet, where it would require several days of repair. The battle, coordinated from afar by Sabaoth, also allowed him the opportunity to contact Luke telepathically, urging him to seek Sabaoth out. In the following weeks, while Thrawn prepared his assault on Sluis, there were several more attempts to capture Luke and Leia. The main trio separated, with Han and Lando going to Abrogado Ray to meet up with a potential contact. We'll get back to them a bit later. While Leia and Chewbacca headed for Kashyyyk, Chewbacca's home planet, where they evaded capture once again by a Nogri team. Luke was nearly captured by Imperials near the planet Jomark, barely escaping by launching torpedoes into a locked tractor beam, but damaging his hyperdrive in the attempt. Thrawn knew he could only go a limited distance and began searching for him. But when Luke, who was about to go into a Force hibernation trance to conserve resources, called out to Leia to find him in the Force, another Force sensitive in the employ of smuggler kingpin Talon Karrde named Mara Jade also heard his call, and so the wild Karrde went to pick him up. This was half a rescue, half a kidnapping, as Karrde had no interest in choosing sides between the New Republic and the Empire. Mara Jade had been a former Emperor's hand, instructed by the Emperor's last command to find and kill Luke Skywalker, something she was keeping secret from both her employer and her quarry Luke. After a brief conversation, Luke was unexpectedly stunned and taken to the smuggler's home base on the planet Merkir as a prisoner. After several days, holding Luke prisoner became somewhat more complicated. An associate of Karrde with a debt to Lando was bringing both Lando and Han to Karrde, while Luke was still imprisoned there. Han and Lando had hoped to discuss getting Karrde's master Slicer, Ghent, to assist the New Republic in tracking their information leak. So while they were on their way, Luke was moved into a utility shed during their stay. Things would only get more complicated from there. The Imperials arrived, hoping to gather more Salamari, and while they were in the system, Luke managed to escape, stealing a skip ray blast boat from Karrde and flying it out over the planet's forests, pursued and then captured by Mara Jade. The Imperials discovered the Jedi's presence, capturing both Luke and Mara, forcing a temporary alliance between Karrde, Han, and Lando to rescue the pair, leaving Karrde little choice but to abandon his base and begin working more closely with the New Republic, expecting a reprisal from the Grand Admiral. He wasn't wrong about Thrawn's intentions, but Thrawn at the moment had more pressing matters to attend to. While 3 squads of stormtroopers and a few vehicles had been stationed in Hilliard City on Merkir to find Luke, Thrawn moved to launch his strike on these shipyards at Sluis. The opening of the battle seemed innocuous. Sluis, which had been inundated with requests for help in local relief efforts, received yet another request from a damaged A-class freighter, the Nartistu. While initially told to get in line with other damaged ships awaiting servicing, it drifted over towards 2 calamari cruisers, themselves undergoing construction or repairs. Wedge Antilles, who was in-system on board Captain Aphion's Larkess, along with the rest of Rogue Squadron, noted the freighter's strange movements and launched Rogue Squadron to examine it. Suddenly, before they could reach it, it exploded near the calamari cruisers. Sensor scans indicated the cargo hold was empty, but its contents had instead been cloaked. Within the hold were special space troopers equipped with zero-G suits, and the 50 captured mole miners, loaded with teams of stormtroopers. As seems to often happen, the Millennium Falcon had also arrived at the same time as Thrawn's forces, seeing the ship explosion and moving alongside Rogue Squadron to investigate. The mole miners and their boarding parties of 4 stormtroopers began drilling into a variety of ships ranging from Gallifrey freighters to Mon Calamari cruisers, allowing their teams to begin attempting to capture the ships. Thrawn's main fleet, consisting of 5 of his Star Destroyers and over 20 Carrack and strike cruisers in support, arrived at the edge of the system, spreading out and attempting to box the defenders in, while TIE fighters started to provide cover for the mole miner teams. Thrawn wasn't planning to destroy or heavily damage the shipbuilding facilities or even necessarily the defending fleet, which he had reduced with his various strikes in nearby systems. He just hoped to leave with as many captured ships as possible. Han was struck with the realization, however. The Imperials were not jamming communications like they normally did. This was because the mole miners were operating via radio remote, and luckily Lando, as the former owner of them, was present and knew most of the command codes. On Han's instruction, the mole miners began drilling again all the way through their host hulls, disabling most of the ships as they attempted to leave the system. Watching his plan suddenly fail, Thrawn called for a full retreat. Pellaeon was initially surprised by this, having grown used to Imperial leaders ordering futile, full-on assaults in the face of failure. But Thrawn reminded Pellaeon that this was only one possible source of ships for them. As long as they still held the cloning tubes, their victory was assured. Moreover, despite the plan technically failing and having taken several weeks of preparation, by any other metric it was a massive setback for the New Republic, who had been forced to cripple dozens of their own ships for very few, if any, Imperial losses, aside from the stormtrooper teams that were inserted. That's all for episode 2 of our Thrawn campaign breakdown. Remember to like and subscribe, as well as turn on the bell to be notified when the next episode comes out, covering Thrawn's next plan to gain ships. Videos like this are also made possible by my patrons on Patreon, linked in the description. So if you're interested in supporting the creation of the next episodes, please consider checking that out. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.